So I'm changing a tie rod on this 2005 GMC Canyon, and I just thought I'd share some stuff that I've found to help other people out. That right there is an impact drill. I highly recommend the DeWalt one. It's pretty good. It's not high torque, but it's good enough for most general uses. So I also recommend having one of these things for if you're doing work on vehicles. This is like, I think it's 2.5 pounds, and it's about almost 12 inches long. I'm going to be using this to bang right in here to get the tie rod out. And I don't plan on keeping that right there, but Canadian Tire had a tie rod end puller, and it's about $17. And so if I don't need it, I'm gonna bring it back. I'm sure I'm not gonna need it. And then there's a little squared off part here where it's meant for something to grab it. So that seems to be 13 millimeter. I also have a large wrench. It says 12 inches by 300 millimeters on it to grab stuff potentially like that nut right there. So one thing's sort of imperative, like if you can't even start a job and you have your wheels off, you're in trouble. So you need to pre-plan everything. I'm going to show you a potential problem. So if you have one of these that's just a regular 21 millimeter, then it's not going to be helpful for you, because I'll show you what happens. Of course, the height of this bolt is high enough that now you can't put your socket onto the end here because this bolt is actually sticking through. So here's an extended one that'll go on and allows you to get either your drill on there, or if it requires more power than what the drill has, then where did I got it? A breaker bar like this can go in there. It's a swiveling one. And then, gosh, this one is about 2 feet long. And it might be a little longer than what you need, but you can get a shorter one maybe. But what else can I say? So what I did the day before, I've seen people having trouble getting stuff off, and a little bit of pre-planning will help you out. For example, I sprayed some liquid wrench into here, some penetrating solvent. The other thing is people sometimes have trouble with this nut right here. So make sure you spray solvent on the threads. But before I did that, I actually took a drill with this bit on it. This one's already screwed now, unfortunately. Like, I need to replace it. But you want really stiff bristles on a drill. And then you want to get in there and be grinding all the way around and removing any dirt and rust that you can. I'd rather do all the things that's necessary to make sure that the bolt doesn't have any problems, so you can get all the crap off from around here. But when you put in solvent, make sure you get on this side. I think a lot of people would potentially, know that it should go here, but this is the bolt, and this is the tie rod, so you definitely want to get it down in there. And so the one that I have is a Moog, and just show it to you real quickly. So you can buy whatever one you think you need, but this one is not the original OEM one. And because it's not original, it might have a different length. So you would definitely need to count the number of turns to make sure your alignment is within proximity. So this one actually appears to be the same, just looking from the side. So there's the nut. Of course you don't include the nut in it, but okay, it looks quite close. So when I take them off, I'll just compare if they're exactly the same distance from, people have been saying, from the center of this spindle, very center, to here, that length matches the ones over here. One other thing is, it would be smart if you have a 21mm wrench. And you know what? Problem being that a lot of these wrench sets don't go up to 21mm. So it's a little bit more advice. If you want to save a lot of money, quite often Rock Auto is a way to save a lot of money. So they're an American company, but even when you do your shipping and stuff like that, you can save a whole lot of money. And so I looked on their website. You have to sort of work a little bit to find the section for wrenches, but I found a set that rolls up in a case. So you have the cloth case and it just rolls up, and there's a set that's all SAE. All of them are SAE, and then you have another set, which I'm choosing to buy as well, that's all the metric and the millimeters. And so they're separate sets. They don't come in the same folder, which would be nice. And boy, the pricing on Rock Auto is pretty decent. Yeah, you don't want to be starting a project, if you can, without having, say, a 21mm wrench for here if you really needed it. Like, I mean, this thing could try and work, you know, but yeah, it's all doable. But because these big ears on here don't let it come this way very well, and I'm pretty sure one of the guys said that this is a 22mm nut, this one right here. So yeah, if you have something like this is not the right size, but if you have something that's gonna grab onto there snugly, it's gonna be, and with some leverage, some length, right, it's gonna be highly beneficial. So yeah, so spray the penetrating sealant, like just get underneath the vehicle and spray it while the tire is on, right? Don't take your tires off. So spray it the day before, spray it in here, let it soak all the way down in here. And as we were saying, spray it in here the day before, and then come in like the morning before, before you drive away for a couple hours, just spray it again. It might not be necessary, but I'd rather not fight with stuff. So hopefully that will be helpful. What else can I think? Yeah, so for a whole bunch of automotive work, for getting rust off of here and all that sort of stuff, highly recommend getting a wheel. This one's so worn out, but that's got stiff wire. This one's too loose, and this sort of polishes stuff, so you don't want to polish the rust. You want to try and have it stiff enough where it can actually try and remove it. And okay, so this Moog one has a little grease nipple that you'll need to install yourself. That little piece at the bottom there. So it comes in the box, and it is 7 millimeters. So you need a 7mm wrench to install that one. And then, you know, once this is installed and all that sort of stuff, drive down to somewhere. I don't know if you have a grease gun, or you can find somebody and attach the grease gun on the end of this. You're supposed to keep pumping it until you see this boot swell. You don't want it to come expanding, like get all the way out of the bottom, but you know, if you can put it in just enough so this thing swells, then you know that there's excess grease in there. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and get this thing going and see how it goes. Hopefully that'll be useful. Okay, one more update here. Had to try and problem solve and figure this one out. It's not that challenging, but so this bolt that's in here on the tie rod can be swiveled around, of course, like at an angle that's this way, that way, or that way. And so I was so it took me 18 turns to get the old one off. I put this Moog one back on 18 turns, and it's matching the correct distance to the bolt. Also, what I did was go one extra step. I took this bolt and took it back about another 1/2 inch, and it was sort of tough to move it around because there was rust, but I moved it back 1/2 inch, and then took this particular one in there and ground out the rust that was on the shaft of the bolt, the thread, and then that sort of thing. I took this thing off. This came off easily without any pressure, but I wanted to hold this so this didn't turn at all, which doesn't really matter, but I'm thinking, I don't know. So I didn't want this to turn while I was unthreading this, and actually there was no rust and no pressure holding that from coming off. It came off easily, 18 turns. This is the new one back on there. Anyways, because the tie rod can have all this movement, and when it's straight up and down, and it's in here, it'll have an angle that's too strong, and it won't get up into there because of the angle. So and you can't change the number of turns, so what you do is grab that one and just take it and force it that way so that it'll go up into that hole, and then once it's up there, straighten everything out and tighten it down and all that sort of stuff. This one has a castle nut and a little cotter pin. What else can I tell you? Everything went well. You know, it came out with just smacking this a number of times, and then, as I've seen on other videos, and then just banging down on the thread, the top of the thread, and it came out no problem. Yeah, and I was able to get that nut off well, because I guess maybe because of the fact I put in the liquid wrench penetrating solvent. Yeah, the other area up here is when this is through. Of course, is you want to put the liquid wrench on that nut, you know, days in advance, whatever, a day before, whatever, if you have the time. And that one came off well as well. Of course, up here also, take in a brush and get rid of all the rust that's sitting above the nut. Of course, that's going to stop it from coming off, so use a pretty coarse brush. There's smaller ones you'll need to get on the back side, ones that are like a toothbrush, but make sure it's heavy, thick, aggressive wire to get in there and clean all that sort of stuff. All right, so far so good. It's going well, thankfully. So I just called Moog customer service. They have a 1-800 number, and I would call them before you start this stuff in case it's like not their hours of operation. So there's the 21mm extended. Looks like on this one, this bolt on the Moog doesn't extend up as high as the old one does. So let's see here. You could technically use a short one on there to do the torquing. So there we go. So here's the torque wrench, and they're gonna ask you what vehicle it is and all that sort of stuff anyways. Doesn't make a lot of sense that it's so very different from vehicle to vehicle, but in my mind, but they asked, you know, what year is the truck, and is it 3.5 cylinder, and is it 2-wheel drive, 4-wheel drive, anyways. So so I torqued this down to 33 foot-pounds is what they said. And then they said after that you turn it about 90 degrees. So mine couldn't quite go 90 degrees. So if you can imagine 90 degrees, if I'm like that, then of course 90 degrees is completely here. So it's at right angles. So they're saying potentially, mine didn't go that far. Mine only went, mine at 33, I was there, then I could only turn it about there, sort of thing. And the reason you have to stop, this is the important thing with this Moog one, you have to stop where these holes line up. How do we go in here? Where I'm going to get this in from the back side, of course, because there's a hole in the back side, but where that hole in the shaft, there we go, it'll go in there, lines up with that castle nut in order to stop it from untwisting and that sort of stuff. I went one step further and I used blue thread locker. Apparently it's not necessary, but yeah, as you can see, you put it through and then bend this from side to side to stop the nut from coming off. So yeah, so far everything went well. Now I will do the other side. The nice thing about this Moog tie rod end is it has a squared over section for putting on this wrench and holding it. So one wrench there, and of course don't forget to tighten this thing down. So while you're holding this in one direction, you can spin this tight up to your tie rod end. So I've tightened that up. You know, I'm assuming that I don't need any suspension, any alignment changes, because it just went back exactly where it was. So on this nut, I slid it up here a little further and then put some thread locker onto the shaft, the threads, and then now I will just get that cotter pin set in there properly, bend it over, and then it's done.